Hello, everyone. Welcome, or welcome back, to my workroom. I'm Franklin, and I am delighted to be doing an episode for the first time from the workroom in my new, or at this point, I suppose, new-ish apartment with the workroom in something like a settled state. Not absolutely, but enough that I can, what a concept, actually work here in the workroom. Boy, it feels really, really, really good. There remains in this apartment exactly one cardboard box that remains to be unpacked. One. And even that one is almost completely empty. In fact, I think today will be the big day when the last of the cardboard boxes exits the premises. And all I can say is, so long, and I hope I don't have to see packing boxes for a long, long, long time. So here I am, and working in my workroom, knitting, in fact. And let me tell you about this. Small project, but necessary. I am knitting myself a pair of fingerless mitts from a pattern that I quite like, with the arresting name of Twist in My Sobriety. Written, as it happens, by the proprietor of my neighborhood yarn shop, Les Tricoteurs Volants. You've heard me mention them before. You'll hear me mention them quite a bit because they're my neighborhood yarn store. I mean, come on. I love this pattern. In fact, when it was brand new, I decided to knit myself up a pair of Twist in My Sobriety mitts and started them and did not finish them, and in fact took them off the needles, and not for any reason that has to do with the yarn or the pattern itself, which is very nicely put together, for reasons that I will come back to a little while later in this episode. But here I am now tackling the mitts once again, this time using a different yarn than I used the first time. This is a lovely classic base from the Plucky knitter, one of my favorite dyers. And this is Plucky Primo worsted in a lovely yellow-green called Prickly Pear. I'll put in some close-ups here. It is a deliciously bouncy, cuddly, springy, sort of juicy yarn with a consistent thickness to the spin. And what I like about that is that Twist in My Sobriety. As you'll see here, I'll put up some photos. And full disclosure, these photos from the pattern, I took these photos. So I have a very personal connection, you see, to this particular pattern. The design is done in Traveling Twisted Stitch, and Traveling Twisted Stitch, which is a cousin of cabling, tends to look especially well in lighter colors, worked with rather even, nice, plump yarns, exactly like this one. So I have high hopes. In fact, just the look of the twisted 1-1 rib section for the cuff that I've been working on so far, extremely promising. I can't wait to get these onto my little fingers, not least because winter has arrived in Paris. And now, let me tell you, compared to the winters in Chicago, which I have just escaped after 20 years of living through them, winter in Paris so far is absolutely nothing, even in a very old building, which you might think would be, perhaps terribly cold. Well, number one, it's not. I'm very relieved and happy to say, decent insulation and also a very good central heating system. So I'm pretty darn cozy in here. And outdoors, mind you, I have seen Parisians walking around bundled up for a trek through Antarctica with the down parka with the faux fur trim. I assume it's faux. In Paris, maybe it's not, but with the fur trim and the mittens and the gloves and all bundled and shivering like this. Whereas for me, our coldest day here has still felt kind of like beach weather. So I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay. I'm enjoying it. However, I did notice on an extended outing to one of my favorite places in all of Paris, the flea market. Definitely, we will see some video of the flea market on this channel. But I was on a mission the other day, so couldn't video and accomplish the mission. I was at the flea market. I was there for quite some time, meandering around looking for what I needed, and did not have gloves or mitts, and discovered that my hands were getting definitely a bit cold and achy. Therefore, it's time for some mitts. And so this is my current knitting project, which I am enjoying immensely. It's not the only thing that I'm working on, however. I have been looking around at what needs doing, and I will tell you that my favorite projects are always projects like this, which are based on some kind of personal need. At the time, there's something about meeting one of my practical needs myself that makes me feel really good. I was certainly brought up to be that way. My parents, both of whom very creative people, taught me that the best way to get exactly what you want is to learn to make that thing yourself. And it manifested in our various homes as I was growing up in all kinds of different ways. I mean, my father built furniture that we needed. When a computer desk was not a thing that you could readily go out and buy because we had a computer at home because of my father's job, quite a while before it was common to have a computer at home, my father designed and built a desk that was not made for writing letters or for typing on a typewriter, but was made for having a computer and a printer. And my mother designed and created so many things, often revolving around things that were sewn. So, for example, the best curtains that we ever had in our house were always the ones that my mother made. My mother had to housekeep on a limited budget, especially when I was very young. And so when the family sofa was really beginning to look disreputable, and so was the armchair that we had in the same living room. They were both getting shabby at the same time, and rather than going out and buying new, and this was, late 1970s, early 1980s America, where people, honestly, at that time, I don't think thought twice about just throwing out the old furniture and bringing in some new. My mother didn't do that. My mother took an upholstery class and did a spectacular job of reupholstering our living room furniture all by herself. And as she said later, that way she was able to get exactly what she wanted at a price that we could afford. And she also, and this was so important, she also pointed out to me, I remember, that she enjoyed doing it. So it wasn't just saving money, and it wasn't just the satisfaction of looking at the couch and saying, that's exactly what I wanted. It was also this idea that there was the added benefit of enjoying the process itself. And so I got that from both of my parents, this feeling that it's good to know how to do things so that you can get what you want, but also because the journey to the realization of the thing that you need, or that you want, is worthy in itself of celebration. And so, yes, of course. I mean, I live in a city that is absolutely awash in clothing stores. And I could go out and I could just buy myself a pair of mitts, but why do that when I can have the fun of making them myself? So that's what I'm doing. I'm also looking at making a lot of other new wardrobe pieces for myself. If you've been watching for a while, and you remember back, I did a video, I'll put a link to it. I did a video about going fabric shopping in Chicago to 2121, one of my favorite places in all of Chicago, and I bought a bunch of fabric for a bunch of things for me. to wear and to use, including a messenger bag and a cap, and I have not sewn them yet, and looking forward to doing that now that I'm here. I'm only hesitating because I'm finding that living in Paris for a few months has made me look rather closely at how I dress myself and think that I might like to make some little changes to the projects that I had in mind. And so I'm not jumping into clothing myself. However, I am ready to dress up the apartment. I've got the fundamentals in here. Those who have been following the saga might like to know that the couch arrived. It's no secret that getting large things, appliances and furniture and whatnot, can be a bit tricky right now. But my couch is here, and since the major furniture is here and things are more or less arranged, I'm now looking at things like coverings for the floors and windows. And the workroom here has two beautiful, beautiful, beautiful French windows in it. Nice, large French windows that let in this amazing light that makes everything look picturesque, including me, including assorted piles of stuff that ends up on the workroom table. Everything looks good in this light. Or, well, I don't want to say that I look good. Let's say I look better in this light than I deserve to. And that doesn't mean, however, that I don't want, number one, a little privacy in here. The buildings outside of this, close enough that, in the evening, if I'm crafting, something, and I'm just wearing, my night attire, I don't necessarily want the neighbors looking in on that. So I would like some curtains. And also, this room does get, especially in the warmer months of the year, quite a lot of direct light in the afternoon. And although there are awnings outside that I can use to control that, I would also like something to temper the light as well. And it would not be difficult to walk over to a place like IKEA. We do have IKEA in Paris. It's kind of an abbreviated greatest hits IKEA in the city center, near one of the most famous monuments. The Church of La Madeleine now has an IKEA, two-story IKEA kitty corner from it. I could walk over there and I could get a pair of inexpensive IKEA curtains, and they'd be harmless. And I'm not a snob. I have no issues with decorating with stuff from IKEA. But then I hear my mother in my head saying, why don't you do this yourself? And so what I would like to do, what I am doing, is working with a technique that I have wrestled with unsuccessfully for years, which is filet crochet. Now, if you are not familiar with filet crochet, I'd be surprised if you hadn't seen it, but maybe you don't know what it is. It's a form of lace that is made as the name would suggest to you. It is a crocheted lace, and it's structurally incredibly simple. You make a little grid of little squares, and some of the squares are open, that's your open lacy bits, and some of the squares are closed, and those are your filled in bits. And the filled in bits can be arranged to make any kind of a pattern. And filet crochet has a mixed reputation these days. It's some people consider it to be irredeemably old-fashioned and kind of old maidish. However, the thing about me is I really like old maids, okay? Old maids are my cup of tea. Old maids, old ladies, that's my crowd, And so maybe that's why I love the stuff. I think it's beautiful. I think it's charming, and it also doesn't hurt that it hit its peak of popularity, at least in the part of the world that I was born in, came from, the United States. Really peaked in popularity in the first 2 decades, I would say, of the 20th century. Didn't disappear after that, but it was, judging from when the patterns were published and when the extant pieces seem to date from, that's when it was most popular. Now, I love filet crochet, and again, structurally simple. It only uses the chain stitch and double crochet. And that's all to make these designs, to make this lacy, decorative, figural fabric. But crochet is my second language. And so that in itself was a challenge to me. And also, no matter what I did, I could never seem to get anywhere with filet crochet. I've started pieces many, many, many times, and I have used books to guide me, I have used YouTube videos to guide me, and yet for some reason, this essentially quite straightforward technique just eluded me time after time after time, and it was very frustrating. And what I decided that I would like to do for these windows in here is simple panels, probably only a single panel for each. And that panel should be made of something in a natural white color, probably cotton. So we're talking so far probably the simplest possible sort of curtain, just a simple cotton panel. But what I would like to do is I would like to decorate those panels with insets of filet crochet. It's something that I think would be exactly the style and the look for this, frankly, dream workspace that I am so fortunate to be able to create for myself here in my new home. That's what I want to do. And so I had a very exciting evening this week where I sat down and began to mess around with the first design that interested me. It seemed like a good place to start. It's a simple design from a book that I downloaded online. I'll put a link in the description for this episode. And I'll tell you that the very fetching title is Le Filet Ancien au Point de Reprise, which was published in the early 20th century here in Paris at an address that, according to Google Maps, is an easy 15-minute walk from my front door. Now, unfortunately, the Needlework publisher is not located there anymore. What can you do? Time marches on. However, I thought that was pretty cool, that it was practically in my own neighborhood that this pattern first saw the light of day. And what is the pattern? Well, it's a border motif, and that border motif shows I'm not sure what. I mean, it might be clover, or it might be oxalis, which sort of looks a little bit like clover. I'm just not sure. And ultimately, I decided I don't care. It's very cute, and it has that Belle Epoque, fin de siècle, turn of the century vibe that just makes me all happy and dancy. And so I've decided that that was what I was going to make. And it took me quite a few tries. I didn't keep an exact count, but I would say at least half a dozen times I began and pulled back and began and pulled back. And that was because I was absolutely determined that I brought the stash with me, so I would be doing as many of these filet crochet panels as possible with crochet cottons from stash. I mean, I hauled them all the way over here. They'd better go to work. And I have an absolute grab bag of old metal crochet hooks, steel crochet hooks, many of which are in the small sizes that filet crochet looks best in, if you ask me, is traditionally worked in, I will say. And so I did a lot of messing around, both to refamiliarize myself with the structure and the technique, and to test out the combination of hook and thread that would work best to make this design show up and look well. And I had to start over and over and over again for so many reasons, including, I didn't care for the tension, or the initial open square on the first row was not the same size as the other squares, and things like that, and over and over and over and over until finally, I found myself looking at one complete row that also looked well, that did not look like I had made a mistake over here, and then another one over here, and then another one over there, and I was not fooling myself to think, well, no one will notice that, because I know I will notice that. And so it was one row of squares that satisfied me. And from that one row of squares, things got simpler and simpler and simpler until I had what has turned out to be a good beginning for my first successful piece of filet crochet in this really charming, very simple border pattern from this old manual of filet patterns. I could not be happier. And I found myself thinking about this filet crochet moment and about a lot of moments that I've had lately, including I said I would talk about why I am coming back to this mitt pattern, what happened the first time, and what happened to these mitts the first time I tried to make them, and what happened to my attempts at filet crochet. My first attempts at filet crochet over the years, they were all kind of the same thing. I knew that I needed to make a major change in my life because because my health was suffering, both mental and physical. And I worried because this change has been pretty extreme. You know, this is a large change to make. It was very difficult. There were a lot of tears. There were a lot of things I had to do that I did not really want to do. A lot of things and people that I had to say goodbye to that I really did not wish to say goodbye to. And when you make that kind of a leap, you have to reach inside yourself, I've discovered, for reserves of strength that maybe you were afraid were not there. And even when you do it in the aftermath, I have had moments when I have worried greatly about whether changing my circumstances, taking this risk, was the right thing to do. But what I find is that so far, being here, although I will tell you, in case you are contemplating a move of any kind like this, and also just because I don't like to lie on my vlogs. You still have doubts. You have doubts and doubts and doubts and doubts about whether it was the right thing to do, even after you've done it. I have had many moments when I've awoken in the middle of the night and said, "What did you do? What did you do? Was this really a good idea? Was this worth it?" But I find that my mind is clearing. My head is clearing. I am no longer teaching across the United States constantly at a breakneck pace. I will still be teaching, but not in the way that I taught before. And I am realizing now just how confused and addled my brain was. It had become impossible for me to do any kind of even mildly exploratory knitting. I was going into classrooms every week and shaking my little DPN at my students and saying, "Now you must swatch. Never neglect to swatch. You always, always, always must swatch." How much swatching was I doing? I didn't have time to swatch, and I didn't have the energy to swatch. My knitting, to a large extent, slowed to a crawl. There was nothing that I was knitting that wasn't related to a deadline, that wasn't related to a paycheck, and that was the necessity at the time. And now, mind you, I'm grateful that I was able to do that. I mean, you know, it is not the worst thing in the world to be paid to be creative, to be paid for knitting. That's no bad thing. Not that the pay is always that great between you and me. Don't tell anyone I said that, but, you know, there you are. But the part of my brain that really reveled in creativity, honestly, has started to shrivel up. In a word, or two words, I had burned out. And I don't throw that word around lightly. I mean, I had reached a point where it was practically impossible for me to produce anything of quality anymore, at least in my own eyes. And I also was just too tired to try anything new. And variety for me truly is the spice of life. If I have to do the same thing over and over again, darlings, I get bored. A second sock is about as far as I can go in terms of repetitive creativity. And so I lost sight of that entire part of my life, the part that really, really looked forward to digging into projects and to trying something new and investigating new techniques, new ways of doing things, or even, at a certain point, just beginning a new project. And so when things would happen. So, for example, I remember that with the first version of these mitts, it was just a question of the gauge, that was all. I had gotten to a certain point, the gauge was a little bit looser than I wanted it to be. I was not getting a fabric that I liked, and I was too exhausted just to pull out a few inches of ribbing, change my needle sizes, and start over. I was too tired even to do that. So forget about cracking the code on a new to me technique like filet crochet. That was simply not going to happen. And so here I am, here I sit with you today, feeling really calm. I don't want to say I feel excited, because I still had the capability for a long time to feel excited. The difficulty was that the excitement was never followed by the calm space in my head that allowed me to do very much, or do much that was good, with the excitement impulse. So my wish for you, my ardent wish, because you have been kind enough to click on this video, to tune in, to come along with me on this little it doesn't really feel that little to me, on this large change in my life, the way I look at my life, how I lead my life, the things that I do with my life. I hope that you will find some of the same for yourself. If you are feeling stuck, if you are feeling exhausted, if you are feeling that something in your life is out of whack, there is a gear slipping somewhere inside you, that you will come to the place that I came to, where you are able to fix the situation. It might not involve moving everything that you own across the ocean. It could be something quite small, but whatever it is that would work for you, I hope you find that, because this is a good feeling. And since it is a good feeling, and since I haven't felt it in a while, I want to spread it around. So that's what I hope you feel, is calmness. And I hope that until we see each other again, and I hope it will be very soon, that you will find yourself very calmly, but excitedly, enjoying whatever it is that you are making. So until next time, thanks again for watching. Can't wait to have you back in the workroom to show you what else I've got in the hopper. And be good to yourself. Be good to yourself and be good to others. Bye for now. Hey, it's Franklin. Thanks so much for watching. I'd like to thank my patrons over at Patreon for making this and all my other videos and so much of my work possible. If you'd like to become a patron, why don't you stop over at www.patreon.com/FranklinHabit and see what it's all about. I offer my patrons all kinds of goodies, free downloads, free patterns, and weekly live streams from my workroom. Sound good? Come on over. And now, Tennyson's The Charge of the Light Brigade, as performed by Julia Child.
Half a league, half a league, half a league onward, all in the valley of death rode the 600. Forward the light brigade, charge for the guns, he said. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Forward the light brigade, was there a man dismayed? Not though the soldier knew someone had blundered. There's not to make reply, there's not to reason why, there's but to do and die. Into the valley of death rode the 600.